Think about it. Why is it that the more intelligent a person becomes, the more they seem to drift away from the crowd? Why do the sharpest minds so often choose silence over chatter, isolation over interaction? Could it be that what we call social life is for some not a joy, but a quiet burden? What if solitude isn't loneliness, but freedom? In today's video, we're confronting one of the most unsettling truths about human nature, a truth spoken not by an optimist, but by Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who refused to comfort us with illusions, and instead cut straight to the bone. This isn't a video for everyone. It's for those who feel a strange tension in social settings, who often sense they're on the outside looking in, those who find more meaning in a single silent evening than in a room full of small talk. We're diving deep into why highly intelligent people often abandon social life, not because they're antisocial, but because they see it clearly. And stay with me until the end, because the final insight we'll explore might completely transform how you see your own solitude. It's a truth most people never grasp, but it could change everything. Before we begin, if you value depth over distraction, truth over comfort, and self-knowledge over social approval, support this channel. Like, subscribe, and comment below. Have you ever felt more alive, more yourself when you're alone? Your words might speak deeply to someone else feeling the same. Now let's begin with Schopenhauer's first brutal truth. He believed that what most people call socializing is at best a distraction, and at worst a dilution of the self. The average person lives in noise, not just the noise of sound, but mental noise, gossip, comparison, shallow talk, and endless obligations. But the thinker, the one who observes, reflects, and sees, knows that this noise doesn't nourish the soul, it drains it. Imagine you're an artist trying to paint a masterpiece, but every 5 minutes, someone interrupts. Come to this event, answer this message. Did you hear what they said? How much of your vision would survive? How much clarity would remain? For Schopenhauer, this was the tragedy of the thinking mind in a noisy world. And for those who seek truth, solitude is not exile, it is sanctuary. Schopenhauer wasn't speculating. He was observing a timeless pattern. Across history, the most profound thinkers, writers, artists, and scientists have all withdrawn from the world. Not out of hatred for people, but to protect something rare, their inner world. From Newton's reclusive genius to Kafka's melancholic solitude, from the silence of the Alps to Emily Dickinson's hidden sanctuary, solitude has always been the soil where genius takes root. Why? Because when you are alone, you no longer need a mask. In social life, we become shapeshifters, modifying our tone, posture, even thoughts to fit in, to be accepted, to be understood. It's rarely intentional, but it's relentless. Piece by piece, we fragment and become strangers to ourselves. But in solitude, the performance ends. There is no audience to please, no roles to play. You can simply be. And for the intelligent mind, whose inner world is often far richer than the external one, this is not loneliness. It is home. Schopenhauer once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." To the shallow mind, life is simple, obvious, easily explained, and entertainment is enough. But to the deep thinker, life is contradiction, suffering and beauty intertwined, absurd and profound all at once. These are not things that can be discussed in passing or dissected in small talk. And when the world offers only surface, when the mind longs for depth and finds none, the result is not misanthropy, but exhaustion. Some might ask, isn't social connection essential to happiness? The answer depends, not on the quantity, but the quality of connection. Schopenhauer believed most people aren't seeking truth in others, but validation, distraction, and fleeting boosts to the ego. To the philosopher, these interactions are hollow. They do not nourish, they consume. Solitude, then, is not emptiness. It is enhancement. A man of genius is like an eagle, Schopenhauer said. He soars alone. And perhaps you felt it too. That quiet, unsettling moment when you're surrounded by people, but feel utterly alone. Not because you don't care about them, but because the conversation never reaches the depth where your mind naturally dwells. Yet in contrast, when you're alone with a book, alone in nature, or lost in thought, you feel connected, not to people, but to something vast, eternal, meaningful, real. Here lies the paradox. Those who think deeply often feel most connected when they are not connected to society. This isn't to say relationships don't matter, but the kind that matter are few and rare and real. But for the truly intelligent mind, relationships must be more than convenience, more than noise or fleeting comfort. They must be rooted in mutual growth, in authenticity, in a shared search for truth. That kind of connection is rare, and until it's found, solitude becomes not just a preference, but a necessity. Let me ask you, when was the last time a conversation made your soul feel seen? When was the last time you walked away from a gathering feeling whole, not scattered, not drained, but complete? Schopenhauer's honesty stings because it speaks to something we all sense but rarely say aloud. Much of what we call social life is posturing, performance, and distraction from true self-awareness. And that is why the intelligent, the self-aware, begin to withdraw, not to escape the world, but to understand it, not to reject others, but to return to themselves. And that return is sacred. If you've ever felt guilty for needing time alone, for declining invitations, for finding no joy in small talk or social media, this is your permission to stop apologizing. It may simply mean that your mind craves something deeper, something real. As Schopenhauer saw it, solitude is not a retreat from life. It is preparation for living it on your own terms. And we're only just beginning. If solitude is the sanctuary of the wise, then what, Schopenhauer asked, is the true purpose of social life in this world? To answer that, we must understand how he saw human nature, not through the lens of idealism, but through stark realism. He was no romantic. At the root of all human activity, he said, lies the will to live, a blind, ceaseless, unconscious drive to survive, to reproduce, to dominate. This force, according to Schopenhauer, shapes not only our biology, but our behavior, our relationships, even our societies. Social life, then, is often not a place of harmony, but a subtle battleground, a theater where ego seeks recognition, status, validation. For the average person, socializing is a form of survival. It's where alliances are formed, value is signaled, mates are found, control is asserted. For Schopenhauer, this constant dance of egos, though necessary for many, was a distraction for the thinker. Because those who rise above instinct, who question the nature of life, of reality, of meaning, will inevitably feel alienated from these games. It's not arrogance. It's not that they think they're better. It's that they've become disinterested, detached, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too deeply. Imagine standing in a crowd where every voice speaks a language you barely understand. The words feel hollow, the gestures rehearsed. You smile, nod politely, but inside it's as if you're watching a play, a performance in which you were never cast. That is how the intelligent individual often feels in ordinary social settings. Not from arrogance, but from a quiet dissonance between depth and surface. And this discomfort only grows with awareness. The more you come to know yourself, the less tolerance you have for inauthenticity, for masks, for empty noise. The clever learn to blend in, but the truly wise, they often choose not to. They disengage, not to rebel, but to preserve their inner world. Schopenhauer said it plainly, the more a man has in himself, the less he will want from other people. When your mind is rich, alive with questions, ideas, passions, the superficial becomes unbearable. You no longer seek company to fill a void. You seek solitude to protect your clarity. This is why so many intelligent souls are drawn to philosophy, to music, to literature and art, not as mere pastimes, but as lifelines. These pursuits offer something rare, a space where the soul can express itself fully, without interruption, without dilution. But let's be honest, this path isn't easy. Solitude may nourish the thinking mind, but to the outside world it can look like withdrawal, coldness, or arrogance. Friends may ask, why don't you come out more? Family may worry, are you okay? Society may label you antisocial, but the truth is, the intelligent person may be more alive, more centered, more whole in solitude than most are in the bustle of social rituals. Let's not forget, Schopenhauer himself lived much of his life in solitude, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. He found human company exhausting and spent his days in books, long walks, writing, and deep reflection. His so-called pessimism wasn't cynicism. It was the grief of a man who saw too clearly. He understood that to perceive reality without illusion is to recognize the suffering woven into the human condition. And once you see through the illusions, the small talk, the shallow motives, the endless performance of modern interaction, it becomes nearly impossible to return to the surface. You begin to crave truth, honesty, silence, not because you're broken, but because you're awakening. So let's pause here and ask the question that matters. How much of your time is spent around people who truly see you? Not your title, not your appearance, but your soul. How often do you speak your truth without translating it, without filtering it so that others might understand? And if your answer is rarely, then perhaps your solitude is not a flaw. It's a sign of inner alignment. This is why Schopenhauer believed that solitude belongs to the exceptional. Not exceptional in the way society defines it, not wealth, not fame, not mere intellect, but exceptional in independence. Those who are emotionally self-sufficient, spiritually curious, and mentally awake, they do not fear solitude. They welcome it because they are not empty. They are full, and they do not need constant validation to feel alive, to feel real. But let's be clear, solitude is not isolation. Schopenhauer was not preaching nihilism, nor was he rejecting humanity. He was calling for something deeper, a more meaningful engagement with life, an engagement that begins with the self. In his view, the only way to truly understand the world is to first step outside its noise. And here lies the painful irony. The more self-aware you become, the lonelier the path may feel. The smarter you are, the fewer people you can truly relate to. But at the same time, the more aligned you are with your true nature, the freer you become from the expectations of others. It's a paradox. Fewer connections, deeper meaning, less noise, greater peace. And in that paradox, Schopenhauer saw wisdom. He didn't view solitude as emptiness, but as space. Space for the soul to breathe, for the mind to think, for the spirit to expand. He saw the retreat from social life not as a loss, but as a return to self-mastery, to clarity, to inner freedom. Ask yourself, what have you discovered in your quietest moments? Who have you become when no one was watching? Would you trade that depth for shallow companionship? Would you give up self-knowledge for social approval? Most people would, but maybe you wouldn't. And maybe that's why you're here, because you're not searching for noise. You're searching for truth. And Schopenhauer, he would tell you, that's exactly why you don't fit in. So let's go even deeper. Schopenhauer didn't just explain why intelligent people abandon social life. He revealed what they find in that abandonment. Because solitude in his eyes is not passive. It's not waiting or hiding. It is active liberation. In solitude, we begin to peel away the endless layers of illusion that society drapes over us. And what's left, when the noise is gone, is truth. To Schopenhauer, one of the greatest illusions of social life is the belief that others can complete us, that happiness is something we find in approval, in praise, in companionship. He called this the folly of dependence, and he argued, this illusion leads most people into quiet cycles of disappointment, insecurity, and self-betrayal. But the wise, they stop searching outside for what can only be cultivated within. Schopenhauer once wrote, all truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. The same, he believed, could be said of solitude. First, it is mocked as loneliness, antisocial behavior, even weakness. Then it is feared because it strips away distractions. But finally, when understood, it becomes obvious, essential, necessary. Let's consider how this unfolds in a real life. The young, intelligent soul often begins the journey feeling out of place, not broken, but misaligned with the world around them. As a child, they may have been introverted, quietly observant, sensitive, uninterested in the games of popularity or fleeting trends. While others sought constant stimulation, they were drawn to silence, curiosity, and thought. Often they found themselves lost, not in noise, but in imagination. And as they grow, this difference sharpens. School becomes tedious. Small talk becomes unbearable. Peer groups seem to orbit around hollow things. The pressure to conform is relentless. Many gifted minds are taught to shrink, to silence their depth in order to fit in. But eventually, some stop trying, and that is when everything begins to change. They stop showing up out of obligation. They no longer fake interest in things that bore them. They decline invitations that drain rather than uplift. And they retreat, not in despair, but into themselves. And in that retreat, something rare unfolds, a confrontation with the self. In solitude, there is no audience, no one to impress, no roles to play, just silence. And in that silence, we begin to see ourselves clearly, our fears, our desires, our flaws, our gifts. This is not easy. It can be terrifying, which is why many run from it, filling every moment with noise, with company, with distraction. But for the intelligent soul, this confrontation is sacred. It is the first step to inner mastery. This path mirrors the journey of many great thinkers. Take Friedrich Nietzsche, who saw solitude not as punishment, but as a sacred responsibility. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." For Nietzsche, as for Schopenhauer, solitude was the price of truth, and truth was the highest pursuit. But solitude does more than reveal the self. It reveals the world in ways that the noise of society never can. When you step away from the crowd, you stop reacting and start observing. You begin to see patterns in behavior, in politics, in culture. And more importantly, you begin to question them. Why do we crave approval? Why is silence feared? Why is distraction glorified while stillness is condemned? These questions do not arise in the noise. They arise in the quiet. And the more you sit with them, the more clearly you begin to see, not just the surface of things, but their essence. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said, "The greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness." He wasn't speaking only of physical health. He meant mental clarity, emotional stillness, the spiritual wholeness that solitude alone can protect. Every time we force ourselves into social rituals that clash with our nature, we pay a price. We drain our energy, fracture our peace, and lose ourselves bit by bit. But this truth comes with a burden, because once you've tasted real solitude, once you've seen the world with awakened eyes, you cannot unsee it. The disconnection you feel grows not because you hate the world, but because now you understand it. And that understanding brings pain. You begin to see how people lie to themselves to feel accepted. You notice how often conversation is just noise to avoid the terror of silence. You see how many relationships are built not on love or truth, but on mutual distraction. And this realization is both sobering and liberating. You no longer crave what you once did. You stop chasing approval. You stop clinging to validation. You become sovereign, whole. And this, Schopenhauer believed, is the true reward of solitude. Not just peace, but power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. So ask yourself, when do you feel most alive? Is it when you're performing for others, or when you are lost in silent presence? Is it when your mind is scattered in small talk, or locked in deep, focused contemplation? The truth is, some people are not built for constant interaction. They are not here to entertain, nor to be entertained. They are here to observe, to understand, to create. Their nature is not social, it is spiritual, intellectual, existential. And the tragedy? Many never realize this. They silence their depth to fit in. They trade their clarity for comfort. But perhaps you are different. They spend years trying to fix their need for solitude, as if it were some flaw to be corrected. But what if it's not? What if your longing for solitude is not a weakness, but a calling? What if solitude is the environment your soul needs to bloom? Schopenhauer believed this deeply, that only in solitude can we become who we truly are. Everything else is compromise. Everything else dilutes the truth of the self. This is why he wrote so often of the thinker's loneliness, not to glorify suffering, but to reveal its necessity. You do not become wise by always being surrounded. You become wise by having the courage to be alone, to face your doubts, to wrestle with truth, to endure the silence until it finally speaks back. And if you are on that path, if solitude calls you louder than the crowd ever could, then know this: you are not broken. You are becoming. And the final truth, the one that changes everything, is still to come. So here we are. We've uncovered why solitude is not an escape, but a deliberate path. We've seen why intelligent individuals like Schopenhauer often turn away from social life, not out of arrogance, but in search of something deeper. But what is the ultimate truth? What is the final insight that makes this solitary journey not only bearable, but necessary? It is this: the highest form of self-realization can only occur in solitude, not in applause, not in conversation, not even in love, but in the raw, unfiltered presence of your own mind, stripped of noise, stripped of masks, stripped of distraction. There is no one to impress, no role to play, no audience. There is only you. And that is where the real work begins. This truth is uncomfortable. Most people spend their lives resisting it, because being alone means seeing what you've tried to ignore, feeling what you've suppressed, hearing the thoughts you've buried beneath constant distraction. But for those brave enough, and yes, it is an act of courage, solitude becomes the gateway to enlightenment. Let's return to Schopenhauer one final time. He believed the world is driven by blind will, that suffering is woven into existence itself. But he also believed something more, that through detachment, through art, through philosophy, through solitude, we could transcend that suffering. We could, even for fleeting moments, step beyond the cycle and glimpse something timeless. And here's the final twist: the truth that turns solitude from a refuge into a revolution. For Schopenhauer, solitude wasn't just a place to hide. It was a form of spiritual rebellion. To be alone, to not need constant validation, to create for the sake of creation, to think for the sake of truth. This, in a world addicted to noise and conformity, is an act of defiance. The intelligent person who embraces solitude is not retreating from life. They are elevating it. They are choosing meaning over comfort, clarity over popularity, freedom over belonging. And once you make that choice, the world will notice, and it will try to pull you back. It will tempt you with noise, with applause, with the false promise of connection. But you will know the difference, because you have tasted silence that nourishes, stood in stillness that asks nothing, yet gives everything. Now let's turn inward one last time. Ask yourself, what have I discovered in my solitude? Have I become clearer about who I am, what I value, what I will no longer tolerate? If the answer is yes, even in part, then know this: you are walking a path that Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Jung, and countless other deep minds once walked. You are reclaiming your inner life, and that is the highest form of personal power. But solitude does more than sharpen the mind. It opens the heart to the universe, to the eternal, to the divine. When you step out of the crowd and into the silence, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear what is real, not what is trending, not what is expected, but what is true. You realize that life is not about accumulation, but about realization. Not about how many friends you have, but how deeply you know yourself. You stop comparing. You stop competing. You stop pretending. You become simple, whole, grounded. And from this place of self-possession and clarity, you can finally return to the world on your own terms, not to be consumed by it, but to contribute to it, not to belong to it, but to influence it. Because now you are no longer seeking from the world, you are giving to it, from your overflow, from your wisdom, from your solitude. And that is the final paradox. The more you embrace your solitude, the more powerful your presence becomes. When you return to the world, you no longer speak just to fill silence. You speak with purpose. You no longer connect out of fear. You connect from wholeness, from abundance. You are no longer a passenger in society, swayed by its tides. You are the author of your own life. This is the path of the intelligent soul. And yes, it is lonely, but it is the sacred loneliness of the mountain climber, the poet, the sage. It is the solitude of those who refuse to live a half-life, of those who would rather face the silence than lose their soul in the noise. And if you are one of them, if solitude feels more like home than any crowd, know this: you are not alone. You are part of a hidden lineage, a quiet brotherhood, a silent sisterhood. From Schopenhauer to you, the path of the awakened is narrow, but it is yours to walk. Walk it with your head held high. And when the world asks, why don't you show up more? Smile gently and answer with the calm certainty of one who knows. Because I've already found what you're still searching for. If this video spoke to you, take a moment, not for us but for others walking this same path, to leave a comment. Share your story. Let others know they are not crazy, not broken, not antisocial, but awakening. Like, subscribe. Send this to someone who is quietly carrying this truth within them. Together we are building something rare, a space where thoughtfulness is not an exception, but a standard. And remember, solitude is not your weakness. It is your strength. It is not your burden. It is your gift. And in that sacred silence, everything begins. Thanks for watching.